up, Mr. Eminem?
How
How you doing, brother? All right.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. All right, we'll call to order our first budget meeting, and I am going to thank you all for being here. I know we have some on their way. I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Charles Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for taking your time this evening to attend our budget workshop meeting tonight. We do have the directors here and the supervisors. They'll come in one by one to the meeting as their budget portions are presented in case anyone has any questions. We did submit a memo to the Mayor and Council on May 12th from the Director of Finance and myself, and I'll just read through some of the highlights of the budget and then we'll go into detail. The draft FY21 budget that we submitted possesses no increases for water, sewer, electric, or tax rates this year, we're happy to report. Included in the draft budget are new revenues from the Lowe's water tower attachment lease of $25,800 annually, revenues from 6 months of operation of the Unified Sewer District totaling $320,000 as calculated by the Director of Public Works, and a lodging tax revenue of $75,000. Transfers from the city's enterprise funds to the general funds are as follows. Electric fund, $3.2 million. This is up from prior budget years. Sewer fund is $488,000, and the water fund is $30,400. And something else staff is happy to report to date, the transfer from reserves budgeted for FY20, the $801,000 has not been used due to unfilled positions and other expenses not realized. And the good news here is the reserve transfer from FY21 has been decreased to $455,000, down from the $801,000. The reserve balances have also increased in the FY20 budget year, and our reserve account balance, as it stands today, all reserve account balances, $11.4 million, which is up over previous budget years. This budget also includes a new lieutenant's position in the police department and a full-time administration position, along with a part-time economic development position. The draft budget we've submitted to you also is balanced. So with that, we'll go into our presentation this evening. As we discussed, no increases in water, sewer, electric, and then we've got those new revenues we talked about. There are investments proposed in city infrastructure and human resources, as well as continuing to increase our reserve account balances. Just some
City Manager, we're real quick, just for City Council. If you see something you have questions, let's please just let me acknowledge you, and then we'll go ahead and get those answered as we're going through
Please
this.
stop. And then as we go in through each budget, we'll stop and we'll ask if there are any questions related to those budgets. Just a little overall high view of the budget that's proposed. Total revenues, you can see there how the breakdown is. The majority of our revenues, as everyone is aware, comes from electric revenues, so almost $15 million, $14.9 million. And then you have revenues from the sewer fund, the water fund, and then our golf fund, which is not very large at $25,000. And then, so our total revenue over the last four budget cycles, we're tracking that for council now, a $30 million total revenue. So revenues are up over the past few years. General fund transfer from the electric funds. This is one of our largest transfers that underwrites our general fund. So you can see that's up quite a bit, and we'll go into the details on why that is this year. That is good news. So we've returned to the $3.2 million where we were several years in the past after that dip. General fund transfer from the water fund. So it is at $30,400, which is down over previous years. Last year we did not transfer at all in an effort not to raise rates. We did not make that transfer to offset general fund. Transfer from the sewer fund has been static for about the last 2 years, although it's up slightly, $488,000. A lot of that is due to two things I'll point out. One is we paid off a very large loan 2 years ago, so we had excess revenues. Large block of that is going into reserves for future upgrades about the plant, which you'll hear quite a bit on this evening. The other, as we touched on earlier, is the additional revenues from the Unified Sewer District is coming in. only half a year of those revenues, but that has allowed us to increase or hold that transfer steady. So that's good news in our budget. Realty transfer tax collection, this is looking back. So we've kept our number static in our budget, but you'll see it's up. And there are two, FY17 and FY20, that realty transfer tax was very lucrative, almost $700,000. And that's related to land sales, building sales within the city. It's basically one very large building that's sold. So there's some very good news here. That's one reason why our reserve balances are up, because we don't use realty transfer tax for operations. We put it in a reserve account, and then we spend from there based on council's authorization. Budgeted tax collections. So you'll see that number's down. It's about $2.3 million budgeted in FY21. Two big reasons for that, and that's in your budget, very well detailed out by the Director of Finance. What's gone up to about $911,000 is our nonprofits. So that number has gone up over the last few years. We've got more of those that we obviously can't charge taxes to. The other reason why that's down a little bit is two incentive packages. One we've done for the residents of River Place, and the other is the rental to homeownership incentive. So that number's in the just under $50,000 range. So that's one of the reasons why, because as council is well aware, we kept the tax rate static after reassessment. So those are some of the changes to explain that. All right, so we'll move into the executive budget, the capital portion of that. So the only capital item that we're requesting this year for council, basically this is council's budget. The only change is we're going to upgrade the iPads that you guys use. They are now, Gary and Trish are going to help me, 7, 8 years old. So they're due for an upgrade. And then additionally, what you'll see when you look at the detailed reports in the budget, the iPads that we have are going to be passed down to some of the directors who could use them. So they'll go to their budgets, but councils, if this budget is adopted, will get upgraded. Are there any other questions on the executive budget?
Any questions from council?
The only other thing I'll point out is that there are some, in line item 311 of that budget, executive special projects and assistance fees. That's where we put together all of the donations that we make to nonprofit groups. There's quite a list there. Mm-hmm. It's a total of $16,000 this year. I will note, though, that we did remove the donation to the AFRAM program this year, because so far that's the only one we're aware has been canceled due to the COVID-19. So that list is there should council want to review that for who we traditionally make donations to. And if there are no questions, we'll move on to the administration department, and obviously our Director of Finance is here. We're working on the security camera upgrades. Our IT department, Gary Andrews, have been working on this at the police department, upgrading their cameras and upgrading our server over the last 2 budget years. That will continue. So more server stuff is in here, more switch. There are new computers to be replaced, and IT gives us a very good replacement schedule for all the departments. So you see those year after year in there to keep those up to date. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but this is the year we're starting to transition to the VDI system and the SLIM clients, so you'll see some of those things. Additionally, there are 2 HVAC units in City Hall to be replaced at $19,000. If we can stay on that track and this budget gets approved, there'll be 1 more to go next year at $9,500. So that'll mean all 7 units here have been replaced over the last, I believe it's 4 budget years. And then June and I discussed it when we were going through the budget. We'll start right over, basically. So that's in this budget. Are there any questions on the admin budget?
Any questions, council?
I gotta see.
The only other comment I'll make, I'm sorry, sir.
No. Councilman Mulvaney is.
I'm flipping through.
Okay, the only other comment we'll make, is that when you look at the line items from FY20 to FY21, salaries are up, but that includes the new position in administration. And when we did the costing on that, there's some more details later in the presentation, but only 6 months of that employee is in this budget. So when you look through it and you see that anomaly, that's the explanation for why that's a little higher.
I did have one question.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
The professional fees category, I see the amount requested is almost $150,000, up from 78, if I read that correctly. That's an awful large spike for professional fees. I was wondering or I don't know if I'm reading it correctly, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, let me get where you are so that I can follow that. What's the line item number there, if you don't mind?
01, 120, 4100, 330.
330.
What was the last thing?
330.
Okay, so one of the reasons why that's up in my notes, what you're seeing there at the very bottom of that is legal fees to process sheriff sales.
Yeah, I saw that.
All right, so that's $35,000 really, and I believe this is the first year we've actually budgeted that.
Right.
Because as council's aware, we started that process, we kind of waded into it last year. Kathy Anger, our credit manager, really pursued some of that. This was the first year we had the ability to do that and budget that, so that's a number that we've placed in there so that we can pursue that. Now, obviously, I will add that during this pandemic and afterwards, we are not going to push forward sheriff sales unnecessarily, but that's one explanation. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here that's, I will say our legal fees are up over year, just we've used a lot more. The other issue this year too is
Was the appraiser, that was the other question I had, was the appraiser amount, the 42,000, is that because of the reassessment that was done?
that's assessment occurred last year. That was
Right.
$130,000. This is the normal maintenance of our database.
Okay.
So every year, we have to update that database. We have to do the tax appeals, so on and so forth. And then we also in this budget, because this is a year we have to renegotiate with the police union, those fees are in here as well.
Okay.
Does
That answers my question. I
help,
just didn't
Councilman?
know what that spike was.
Okay. Any other questions for June or any of the other staff?
Councilman Holland, Councilman McCoy? Okay.
All right, so EDIT, in the budget here, you'll see quite a bit of signage in this budget. So for the last few years, we have been trying to invest in our wayfinding signage downtown. It's been a request of the Downtown Seaford Associations. I believe it's been in the budget or in the works for the 5 years. Yeah, so you'll see there $5,000 that's in this budget should council decide to proceed. Also, the Ross Business Park sign, Trish did some research today. I think this sign was actually installed in the last millennium, is that right? Late 90s. So it's due to be upgraded. So there is that in this budget. Additionally, the West Seaford Welcome to Seaford sign that the Chamber of Commerce gave us this year, Trish hasn't included that in her budget. So if council adopts that budget, it'll get included.
Can you remind me, are we doing that sign all on our own, or are we doing that in concert with the chamber? Okay.
Yeah, and I will say, we do have an agreement with Penco because they own the opposite
Right.
side of that. So we actually wrote them a letter, and we have an agreement with them about maintenance if it gets destroyed.
Right. Councilman Holland?
Yep, he answered it.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
okay, yeah. And that's really new, because again, we took that over this year, so. I do think it really will be a good sign if we can get it refurbished and,
Right.
Really help us build our image on the western side of the city. Economic development, replace aged infrastructure and reduce network bottlenecks. So this is spread amongst a bunch of different departments, but just trying to include that in here. And there's a lot, as any budget that we presented to council, there is a lot of information technology work that goes on behind the scenes in really every department. This is the VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. And we moved into that last year based on the recommendation from the IT department. And that was step one. This is step two. And I believe the server upgrade is about $44,000. And then the balance of that money, the $23,000 or so, is spread out in other departments for the work that they need to do. All right, and then there's some memory modules for 2 servers, so we're keeping our servers maintained. That is included in the EDIT budget. And then a lot of cameras, and you'll see that specifically in the police presentation of their budget, but there are several cameras throughout Sports Complex here at City Hall. We're going to add 2 additional cameras, repurpose the 2 that we have here, but add 2 more. 1 at wastewater treatment facility, so for septic receiving, we can see who's coming in, going out, and then 1 downtown, which I know Chief Kraft is here, and he's talked about his initiative to really get some cameras in our downtown and our business zone. So that is in this budget. This is something we would like to talk to council about. The C-Click Fix app, which we started, I think it was 2 years ago. We did that and we tried it. We pushed it out to our residents. We have some people using it, but Trish Newcomer gave us a report. Since 2018, only 130 reports have been received. So about 43 reports per year, and when you're talking about $10,000 in the budget, for each report, that's $233. So we didn't get the usership that we had hoped for. And when June and I looked at the budget and asked these questions, we spoke with Trish about it. We are recommending removal of this service, and we did take it out of the budget, so what you see here does not include that. We certainly can put it back in if council has a desire to do that. But one of the things, and Trish can certainly talk about it, in this last ensuing few years, we've had other ways we can reach our clients and customers.
Right.
So we don't feel it, staff does not feel it's necessary, and we would recommend terminating this service.
Well, it's unfortunate because I think that app is such a cool app to report things, but if people aren't using it, it's too expensive to keep. I understand, but when we first launched it, I really had great hopes people would use it. Yes, sir.
Yes, Councilman Holland. People that use it, was it worthwhile call when they called in to use it, or?
We got some good reporting, and I might ask
Okay.
Trish to just talk about that.
Yeah, we received numerous reports. They would go anywhere from a pothole, broken signage, to miscellaneous reports. Some actually for the police department, so we would have to forward those on. But again, with the age of social media, us having our own
Right.
Facebook page now, Facebook Messenger, we probably get just as many of those complaints through Facebook Messenger than we do this service, and Facebook Messenger is free.
So you remember when we first started this, we really didn't have an easy way for customers to communicate to us a problem, right? And then this all kind of all happened at one time, so
Yeah.
understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish.
All right, any other questions on the EDIT budget?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we'll move on to the code department, and our building official, Mike Bailey, is here, obviously, to answer any questions. So we've got to complete the comprehensive plan update. That, we got an extension from the governor, and it was to be done by the end of our budget year. Due to the circumstances, I believe we're going to have to ask for another extension from the governor, Office of State Planning, I should not say the governor. But that, to finish that project up, is included in this budget, because obviously we need to complete that. Demolitions, code department always tries to budget as much as they can in demolitions. There's $45,000 in this budget. Now that's down by $100,000 from last year. Last year we made a great investment in demolitions, so this is down a little bit. And then their vehicle is a 2010 Ford Escape, so they're going to look to replace that in that budget, so that vehicle upgrade and replacement is in this budget. Just to talk a little bit more about the demolitions, these are the locations. So it's 329 North Front Street, 446 North Front Street, and then 912 Middle Ford Road. So a couple things going on here. We have tried to focus a lot of our energies and efforts in sheriff sale and demolitions in the Front Street corridor area to the extent we can. The Middle Ford Road facility, that building is in deplorable shape. It's fallen down. It has been identified for condemnation I believe, for 5 or 6 years now. So, and as we always do with, it's the building right next to Dr. Rosa's office, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Just a small building, kind of sits back. What we do with this is the list we go in with, but prior to issuance of the bid that Michael does for us in the January, February timeframe of every year, he goes out and surveys all the building stock, and the ones that are the worst go on the list. So this may not necessarily be the ones that get demolished, but based on best information today, this is the list that he's recommending. Are there any questions about the code budget?
Just a question about the demolitions.
Yes, sir.
One of the worst now is the old Man Love building. Is there anything we can do about that?
The old Man Love building,
Yeah.
help me with which one you're,
I believe the old Manlow building's been sold.
Has it?
Right across from the funeral home.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
across from-
oh, yes. Actually, Trish and I have met with the new owner. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
good.
yes, I know
Yeah.
which one you're talking about.
Somebody actually
The old
bought
auto
that.
parts. Somebody did buy it, yes. We actually are in the process of, Mike can update, we're issuing a permit for the building in the back of that, the old warehouse. So there's an owner there who has taken possession of that. Bill Bennett, our Director of Electric, has talked to them about upgrading the electric. So there is some activity there.
Good.
Two different owners, but yeah, so hopefully that'll really change things along that corridor as an entranceway to our
Yeah,
downtown.
that's-
Any other questions on the code
No,
budget?
that was the only one on that wonderful Front Street.
All right, so our police department budget, one of our largest ones, our public safety budget. There's some server room work that's included. This is call it the former Intrado server room. That's where, on the first floor of the building, a lot of our equipment was housed. They're moving servers up there. Council will recall we had some server damage in the basement from a flood. So IT department has identified, let's get that out of the basement and get it up on the second floor. So they've been making plans to do that. So that's some work that our in-house folks are going to do. What we always talk about every year at the police department is vehicles. And we are in our second year of vehicle leasing. And we have gone to Tahoes. Council will recall last year, I believe we purchased 5 in the last budget cycle. And you'll see the number 3 and the 2-wheel drive in red. So I just wanted to point out a couple things. One, the chief is recommending, since we have in our fleet several 4-wheel drives we can use during inclement weather, he's recommending to save costs, we go to a 2-wheel drive model this year. And I did modify to balance the budget in his request, and if you looked at the CIP that was, and compared it, it is reduced by 1. The police department did request 4, but each one annually is about $10,000 leased there, so you can see the cost. We did reduce that. There's the total cost we're at now, down that kind of bottom line, $85,000, so that includes the last 2 budget years. Prior lease and the proposed lease would take us to $85,000 in that line item. Sorry that is so small, but council will recall this was the plan that Enterprise Fleet put forward to replace our vehicles. So we're still working from that sheet of music, if you will. Chief is sticking to that. The plan was first year we'd buy 5, second year 4, 4, and 4 to get us to where we wanted to be. This graph shows you, we looked back when we started that leasing program in FY20. We were spending $60,000 to $70,000 a year on vehicles. So you'll see in these outlying years, if we did not do something, we were going to go, that last year is about $193,000. So that's a large line item budget increase. So that number in FY21 was projected to be $102,000. And if we go back and just with what the chief has done and recommended, it's $85,000. So a couple factors. One, we're going with a little cheaper vehicle, the 2-wheel drive, because he believes he can use those and he has what he needs. The second thing, we did reduce it by 1, so we're not on the plan, but the chief is doing the best he can with his staff to try to control the costs and work towards that. So we may wind up, obviously, extending our leasing term. You know, instead of 4 years to get to 17, we obviously are going to need to go longer. But before I move on with leasing, are there any questions about that?
Any questions, council?
No.
No, sir.
So another item they're looking for in the police department is new uniforms. There's $20,800. And council recalls last year we put in just over $40,000 to get new uniforms for the troops. Not all those uniforms are in. We did approve a color change to the gray shirt, black pants. We've had some problems with the vendors getting those uniforms. This is for our recruits, detectives, and then utility uniforms. So the chief and the deputy chief have looked at this, and they're recommending that we do a BDU-style pants, a little cheaper if they rip them. So that's what's included in this budget to outfit those people with these type uniforms. Any questions on that?
Yes, Charles, these are the
Yes,
same ones you showed us last year with the vest, the gray
Chief-
shirt.
Chief, would you mind?
Please.
Yes, if you
Evening.
recall, Deputy Chief Rappa came in and
Yeah,
actually
okay.
modeled the gray
Yeah.
exterior vest, looked just like a uniform shirt. I do, if it's okay, to make one comment about this. Approximately $6,750 worth of uniforms came in. They haven't been paid, but it's been subtracted from our line item in there, so we have about $20,000 and change left currently. We're not going to get our uniforms until next fiscal year. That amount won't be enough. What you're going to see is, I'm going to talk to Charles about increasing that number to cover the difference between the $28,000 minus the $6,750. And we may be able to reduce the utility uniform amount. We're currently writing a coronavirus grant that may very well offset that significantly from that $6,000. We may be able to eliminate that. So we're waiting to get that approved. It takes about a week once that grant's submitted. And so we should be able to offset it significantly, but that number's going to have to increase to actually pay for those uniforms, since we didn't get them paid for this year. And they've been shut down for months now. So that's where we ran into a problem.
Councilman, did the chief
Yeah.
answer your question?
Sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Okay, so based on the information from the chief and where he's at with these uniforms, this number will slightly be tweaked once we can get that situation taken care of. As with all budgets, there's some computer replacements out at the police department as a routine matter of business. Chairs, if you recall, when the CIP was submitted a few weeks ago, this number was higher, but the chief referenced a grant he's been working on. He's been working on several, and he's been able to get about half the chairs that he needs through this grant. We're crossing our fingers. So the director of finance and I, based on the grant anticipation, did reduce that line item. So that's different than from what council saw in their
Before we let that
CIP.
pass by, Chief,
Yes.
thank you for all, you've done an incredible job working the grants, and people don't realize the impact that has on our budget. So I just wanted to say thank you for all that you do there.
June, it's a team effort, Dave.
All of you, all of you do, because it does help. And again, it can go unnoticed. I just didn't want that to happen, so
And
thank you.
I will echo that. The chief has done a good job in trying to pull money in, all his staff has, but it does create a lot of work for our accounting staff, so we do have to have that support.
Yes.
We talked about cameras when we were in the IT budget, and there is a high street camera proposed. This is an expensive camera, but it's the mounting hardware, it's the connectivity to our fiber system, so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
Councilman McCoy, in the previous slides about the cameras, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the cameras specified as a panoramic camera.
Yeah.
Are these panoramic or no?
Okay, there's a couple different type cameras in there, what's called PTZ cameras, which is pan, tilt, zoom, and then there's a static camera. I'll have to ask Gary, it's a PTZ downtown?
The high street camera has a panoramic and it has a PTZ built into it as well. So it's essentially 5 cameras in one.
10-4.
Wow.
And those are the kind of cameras we want there because we can then manipulate them from a remote location, from our desk, from the call center that the chief has at the department, so we can really do a lot of surveillance, really.
Is this one camera downtown?
So we asked to budget one in capital, and I'm going to give and use part of my grant money from bottom
Okay.
line.
And that'll give you complete coverage of downtown,
High Street.
High Street?
And what you'll see, I believe, and Chief's going to correct me if I'm incorrect, we're going to move into this over the next few years. You'll see more cameras develop. We just completed our server upgrade because before our server was the limiting factor, so we couldn't store the data. now that we can, you're going to see us be able to move forward, build this system out over time. There's some replacing of in-car video systems. A lot of those systems in their cars are on their last leg, have reached end of life. So again, the chief trying to replace them 1, 2 at a time in the next few budget years. Exact same thing with the radios. They need constant upgrading. So by the time you go through them and replace them all, you got to start right back over again. So there's an HVAC system in the call center. I believe there's 5 on the roof of the police department. They are very old. And this one has shown us that it will not last any longer. So we do need to upgrade that. Body-worn cameras. So this, we'll talk about a grant here. In talking with the chief, he is a proponent of body-worn cameras, which I know this council has had some discussions about over the last few years. It is the way of the future, so he's going to start working on grants to help us get that. And then, obviously, storage of that data and that video is a huge thing, so we needed to get our back of house in order before we could really proceed. Any questions on the grants or upgrades?
Councilman Mulvaney has a question.
Councilman Mulvaney, the server upgrade, and you talk about the extra storage of this kind of stuff, there's obviously a limit to the lifespan of these different camera things.
Yes.
How does that, I mean, is it like a 30-day thing, or
Oh,
is it?
storage of data?
Yeah, the storage of the data.
Yeah.
With all these multiple cameras, there has to be a capacity somewhere.
There is. What our IT department did, they looked down the road. So we have a very large server that we're using to store this on. Now, as data grows and we start to store it, that time starts to reduce. We obviously, when you work with police, there are certain videos that have to be kept certain amounts of times.
Right.
And, you know, as a former judge, you know some of the severe crimes have to be kept forever. So they're working those protocols out. And right now, we have plenty of storage for the network that we have. And we're going to plan in scaling up some of those. I think the next step, too, is going to the cloud. So there are these emerging technologies you'll hear about that we're not going to be able to stay static. We're going to have to continually invest and evolve our infrastructure.
To expand it, right, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered that correctly or not.
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Any other questions for police? I will point out a couple things. I'm sorry, did you have a question, sir? As everyone is aware, our call center budget did go down by about $300,000, but our police budget is up by more than that, actually. I think it's about $380,000. So those numbers are reflected in that, and you know, if there are any questions, certainly the chief, June, or I can try to answer them. And then the Parks and Rec Department, our superintendent, Katie Hickey, is here. And there's a few capital items there. They would like to install fencing along Pine Street. And in working with the superintendent, Trish and I, and some vendors, what we're recommending is a black chain link vinyl coated fence along Pine Street there. And the genesis of all this is we are having a lot of problems with people parking along Pine Street. It creates problems for our police department to have to go respond. And we're concerned very much about children that are playing on the sports fields running out into Pine Street. So we don't want people getting out of their cars there. So the idea here is if we can put fencing along that property line there, it's just under 1,000 feet. So it's $20,000 in this budget to install a chain link fence. We hope will avert some issues. We're also having people that visit the area. We have plenty of parking, but they park at the library, creating some problems. There are some things that are going on. So hopefully with these installations, we can get people to better comply with our parking requests.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Mulvaney.
The chain link fencing, is it going to be similar to the, if I'm not mistaken, when we had that sidewalk done on Stein Highway and that new fence went up for the cemetery, it was a stronger type of fence because of the snowplows?
Yeah, you are 100% correct. You have a good memory. And we did 2 types when we did that. We did black
Right.
chain link vinyl coated for the Oddfellow Cemetery, and then we went to the AME Cemetery. We did green vinyl coated, a little taller, because that's what each of them had, and that's what they approved.
I was just thinking,
But yes.
what my question is that with children playing and people are still going to try to park there and stuff, they're going to try to climb over that fence if it's a stronger, heavy duty.
That's a good point. Yeah, what we'll
If that's
do,
what's in the budget.
yes, sir, what we'll do is we'll pull the spec from what we did along Stein Highway. That's a
Yeah.
good suggestion. And we'll look at the gauge of the fence fabric we use there, as well as the poles. And
Because that's held up well.
it has, and it was well installed. We got a good installer there as well.
Right. Thank you.
That's a good suggestion.
Did you have a comment, Katie?
Yes, I did want to let you know, it's not just the basic chain link fence. Ray from Nanaco, who quoted it for me, did raise the grade or the gauge
The gauge, yeah.
of what it's going to be to a thicker material or a heavier material, because he realized that there could be a lot of, potential, not accidents, but
Vandalism.
Issues.
no, not that, but kids trying to jump on it, people
Right.
trying to jump over it, because it will be a 4-foot fence. So we did want to go with just a heavier grade
Yeah,
model.
good, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so in the Parks budget, a few more items. 2 John Deere zero-turn mowers, $20,000, so $10,000 apiece. We're going to, 2 of the Kubotas have reached their end of life, and maintenance costs are, excuse me, I got the hiccup, starting to increase. So we're going to trade those in on these type new mowers. And then there are some other things, a 50-gallon skid sprayer system for $2,000. We're looking at doing some additional trees through an urban forestry grant. Jay's Nest, Ross Mansion, and the Oyster House property. So out there, we'll try to add some shading opportunities. And then last year, we did a resurfacing of the basketball courts at Nutter Park, I apologize. And this year, we'd like to come back. We worked with the Director of Public Works to get us a price and do thermoplastic striping on the court itself. Right now, we painted it with water-based paint, and we'd like to go ahead and do thermoplastic striping. So, Burley can tell you more, but once we do that on that surface, I think it'll last 10 or 15 years, maybe even longer. Yeah, so not that it'll be a one and done, but it'll be a one and not have to do it for quite some time.
Right.
So that is included. And then this is a project that's been in our CIP for several years, expanding the sidewalks at the Jay's Nest. What we have currently, the proposed sidewalk alignment would be roughly in that red shown there, and it goes around the Jay's Nest between 2 of the fields. We're having people in wheelchairs or less than completely mobile that they're having a hard time traversing over the open field, so installing a sidewalk there has been requested, so it's a handicap upgrade, and we've included that in this budget. We've talked about it for several years, but this is in the budget this year. And then the Oyster House property, which council is well aware of, Katie laid out some general ideas about how the upgrades would occur. We did, Director of Public Works and the Economic Development Director and I did put some money in our streets budget to do some work, which we'll talk about when we get to the streets budget, but for this year to offset this. But as everyone's aware, we are looking for fundraising opportunities for this, working with the Chesapeake Conservancy. So other than that money, there is no other money included in the budget for this out of our budget. And then, are there any other questions on parks or the recreation department?
Can you go back to the Oyster House real quick?
Yes.
Just,
There you go.
I should know better, but the Riverwalk, are we funding that, or are we going to use the Chesapeake Conservancy's fundraising to help fund that for the Riverwalk extension?
The Phase 1A that we're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
We are not going to fund that right now. We are working, Trish and I are working with the Chesapeake Conservancy.
So it'll
They
come-
have gotten some funding commitments.
Right, okay.
We're not all the way across the finish line yet, because it's
Right.
about, Trish is going to help me, about a $1.5 million project for Phase 1A. Thank you. We are going to apply for an ORPT grant so we can get some matching funds. But, yeah, we're looking to,
I knew we were trying to get that done in the next 12 months, and I didn't know if with the economy and all that, we're still going to be able to pursue that with,
it's a great question. I'm not real sure. We are still communicating with them. They're still trying to drive the project forward. Where they are now, they're contracting with landscape architectural services to do construction drawings. Because we need to get permits, we need to get drawings that can be bid. So they are advancing that. So once we have that, and I think we all know, once they get a bid and a number, they are going to come to the city to look for some help in funding. But right now, we don't know what that number would be,
understood.
nor when it would occur.
Right, got it. Thank
Any
you.
other questions on the Parks and Recreation budgets. The only other comment I'll make, the mayor and I talked about this today, when you go through there, you'll see a lot is still in this budget, okay? Trips, bus trips, events, programs, things like that. And due to the circumstances right now, some of this is up in the air. We have not really gone through and taken all that out in the hopes that these programs will continue. We're hoping basketball can come back and continue. Our next program up is field hockey. So Trish and Katie are going to work out a conversation with the coaches and see what they can do. Do they have the coaching staff? Can they keep the numbers of children below 10, be safe? So we're going through that process right now and trying to determine what a program is going to look like, when we can restart. But we did not change the budget to say, okay, everything's gone, okay? The only thing I will say, we did remove the $25,000 for Riverfest, because at this point that has been canceled. So we did remove that. You will not see that money in that budget.
National sports stuff changed today. Yes.
I'm sorry, sir.
Councilman Mulvaney, I was watching the news this afternoon with my wife, and they've come up with a active national sports policy that's
Okay.
kicking in June 1st.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're going to see is as guidance gets issued by the federal government, the state of Delaware, we'll take that and we will look at, okay, how can we implement that with our programs, our coaching staff, our paid staff, our volunteer staff, and what does a program look like? The other side of that is we might be able to offer a program. Will the parents of the children allow them to participate?
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. So we'll certainly update council as we move forward, but we did not take a lot of that out in the hopes that we can start to crank these programs back up and go forward. So the next budget up is the electric department capital, and our superintendent of electric, Bill Bennett, is here and certainly can answer any questions council may have. One of the first things, one of the large things in this budget for capital is the expansion of the utility building. Council will remember that this was in the FY20 budget, and when we had the police renovation and then the utility building expansion, that was just too much capital. So working with staff, Bill agreed this project could wait another year. So this project is back and it is included. It's for wire storage and expansion of vehicles that we have. The building is full. Bill and I were out there actually Thursday of last week.
It's cool.
Walked through, looked at it, looked at some things he's going to have to move around on the site. So it would go off the back of the building. It would be 2 bays on either side and then a kind of lean-to area for transformer, wire storage, so on and so forth. We do want to get a lot of that copper wire in a building as well because it's expensive, so we don't want to lose any of it. Just some details about it, 2-bay addition to the building. We would do some things while we're there to the doors, weather stripping, new lighting, repave behind the fence. Our number right now is $600,000 to do that based on some costing that Bill did. And then we've done some financing assumptions here. So we're assuming an interest rate of 3%, a loan term of 10 years. And this would be 3 months of payment. So we're only putting that $17,382 in the budget now because it's going to take us probably 9 months to get plans prepared, get the architect, the approval, and then towards the end of the budget year, we would be in construction, so we would only have to pay that amount. So, any questions on the building expansion?
Any questions? I think we're good.
All right, one of the other issues out there is their phone system needs upgrading, so that's in here at $12,000. And then this is a project that council has seen the last few budget years, renewal of electric infrastructure in Martin Farms. Bill's going to correct me, but in working with the Director of Finance, this is phase 1A of the project. We're going to do the northern end near Farm Street about halfway through.
Correct.
Bill has given me all the words to use, so I'm correct. So he's decided to break it down, and this is a much-needed project. Council's seen these slides several times before. Vegetation maintenance is just incredible. Getting in the back of these yards is impossible with vehicles. So the plan is to place these services underground and much more robust, much more hardened. We really need to help us. It'll hold us from call-outs for our staff, as well as the inconvenience to our customers of outages that occur, and they are frequent.
Can we just,
Yes, sir.
are you going to go through the details? Is that
We-
your next slide?
We can, yeah. Just some, again, it's vegetation maintenance is $7,500 to $10,000 a year every year. This has been here since the 40s and 50s in the backyard, so very aged. You know, about $250,000 to do this whole project, so we're advancing phase 1 of this project in this budget year. And we've been putting money aside for the last 3 budget years, I believe, in reserves. Third year, in reserves. So we're going
Right.
to, you'll see when you look at the budget, you'll see some money coming out of reserves to fund this.
So what is phase 1 again, Bill? What will you accomplish at the end of phase 1?
The overall plan is now, like the city manager Anderson said, the pole lines are running through the back.
Right.
So on the north side by Farm Street, we'll bore underground from the pole that's actually in West Seaford Playground area. Across and put 3 transformers at the end, in between McKean and Reed and Rodney. And then we'll bore down the backyards and run secondaries through there.
Okay.
So the first phase will be the north half
Okay.
of Martin Farms. And that'll get rid of hopefully more than half, because it, knock on wood.
So down each of those sections, you'll go down 3 or 4 houses and stop.
Yeah.
That'll be your phase
Yeah, when
1.
the engineering gets it in there and designs it, we'll look at places to put secondary pedestals in the
Okay.
backyards where it'll feed 4 houses,
Okay.
most of the time. And then we'll run new underground services to the houses. Most of these houses had underground services to begin with.
Okay.
Some of them have gone bad over the last 70 years. Have changed to overhead because it's cheaper to run overhead to the property owner. But this, you know, we'll go back to underground, get rid of the overhead primaries in the backyards. And that's our biggest area for outages
Right.
and problems, and the hardest area to get to.
Right. Councilman McCoy?
Yeah, Councilman McCoy, have we done any estimates to see when you're putting these underground, we're obviously going to save some money in outages and sending people out there. Do we have how much we're expecting that to be as far as like an estimate on how much we'll be saving on that end?
I mean, we could, and I don't want to speak for the superintendent, but we, director, I apologize. We could certainly look back over the last few years and look at what our call-outs were in that area.
It feels like a project that eventually is going to pay for itself in some level.
Well, I think the headache of the residents that live there is worth a lot.
Plus the customer service part of it. These guys go out in the middle of a storm and have to pull a truck or something in the back of
That's what
someone's
I'm saying.
nicely maintained yard is
And
tough.
nobody, you know, everybody plants these trees, and, you know, they don't, you know, they don't realize that in 40 years they're gonna be 50 feet tall.
Right.
And they get old and weak, and, you know, you get a snowstorm and the tree falls and pulls the primaries down, and, you know, they may be out of power 8 or 10 hours, because you can't get trucks in all those yards. Everybody's put a fence up, they don't want you in their backyard. The poles are old, they're not safe to climb, so there's a lot of things that go into it. So it'll increase the reliability of the system. These people aren't gonna see, you know, these long outages and frequent outages. You know, also with the overhead through there and all the trees, the squirrels love it.
Well, we've been talking about this project for a few years now. It's neat to see it finally come to
We've
the
been
table.
talking about it 6 or 7 years, and 3 years ago, we started putting money in the budget to do it, and we were gonna do it at the end of 5 years.
Yeah.
And last year, City Manager Anderson says, you know, we're gonna have over half of the money, can we do part of it? So
Yeah.
this will get rid of half of that area.
2 years from now, it'll be an overnight success.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
So that's a great project that we're going to move forward, and you'll see happen. Additionally, this year, Bill has recommended purchasing a chipper. So right now, we don't own one, and we use Public Works vehicles when they do tree trimming and things of that nature, and we run the truck back and forth to the leaf and limb disposal area. The suggestion here is, can we purchase a chipper, bring it to the job site, chip it, because you can probably reduce 10 truckloads down into one would be my guess on what you could do here. A lot more efficient. We don't have to run vehicles through the city. We can keep guys on the job, get it done. Chippers have changed a lot in their safety mechanisms, so on and so forth. So this is in the budget. Now, I will say, when you reviewed the capital improvement plan, this budget year, Bill requested a dump truck to go with this. So in talking with the Director of Public Works and the Superintendent of Electric, Director of Electric, to reduce the budget amount, we did wind up everybody agreeing to take that dump truck out. And I believe it was $65,000, $62,000. So that's a change you'll see from the CIP. So all of it that was requested did not make it into this budget. But we will look at that in a future budget and see how we go with this purchase first. But that is in this budget. There's some details about it, how big it is, the type. And then in this budget are some additional capacitor banks. Those are needed because we've changed the electrical system with the new substation work, so they're determining where those need to go and installing those. A dial-less crimp gun for 750 MCM, and then new Christmas decorations. Remember, council approved last year us doing it. We got a great, overwhelming support from the community. They actually donated quite a bit of money. This will be year 2 of that. Speaking with the Director of Electric, not sure we can do them all with this, but we're going to try, and we're going to see where we wind up. So you may see this another year come back, but if we can continue down this road, we hopefully in the next few years will have all our Christmas lights upgraded that need to be upgraded.
Bill, you probably have some Christmas lights out there you're waiting for people to come pick up. You have at least 2?
Yeah, 2 of us up here.
Last 2.
All right, we'll move on.
Yes.
All right, so this year, and I know that top picture there is a little tough to see, but there is a vegetative buffer between the Seaford Industrial Park on the west property line and what now is Governor's Grant, Bel Air developments. Those developments have taken off very well, and a lot of those lots, all of the lots in Governor's Grant have been sold and built on. And because that vegetative buffer was planted in the mid-'80s, those trees have now grown up into the power line. They planted them right under a power line. We've topped those trees, and then as property owners moved in, they've limbed the trees. So you can actually see right through the vegetative buffer now. And we're responding to noise complaints, things like that. So worked with Bill, worked with Trish, and we had a public meeting, invited every tenant of the Seaford Industrial Park. The mayor came, and we sent all of them letters, the executive secretary did, and we had one person show up and talked to a few over the phone. They did call us, and no one was opposed to taking those trees down and putting up a fence. So what you see there in the bottom picture is a 8-foot-high chain link fence with slats is what we would like to propose to install there. So the plan here is to put a little bit of city equity into the project. During the winter times, we would work Parks and Rec, Public Works, Electric to take sections of those trees down and then install this fence over a several year period. So what Bill has included in his budget is 1,000 foot of this, so it'd take about 3 years to do this, but we would include $28,000 in this budget to do phase 1 of this. To start, the plan is, in talking with everybody, start down by the Arbutus well.
Right.
Got a lot of people from that development coming into the industrial park, trespassing, walking their dogs, cutting through to other parts of the city. And we've gotten some complaints from the tenants there that, hey, they'd like to address that. Just not a high priority for the police department, so we think fencing could help curb some of that. So that is included. Yes, sir.
Councilman Holland. Hey, before you, if they're complaining about noise, how's the chain link fence going to cut down on the noise barrier?
It's really not. What we've done as far as the noise is we've worked with those tenants along there. A couple of those buildings are pretty close to the property line, and we actually went out and met with them. There's some machinery that was in those buildings that needed some vibration isolation, and they needed to be moved in the building. So we addressed those. Part of it, I think, another issue is the people that live in those houses, there's 3 or 4 there, can see right through. So when the gentlemen come, or ladies come out of the buildings for a break or something like that and talking, they can see right over to them. They can hear what they're saying. So you're right, the noise is not going to be lessened. We're still going to have to deal with noise complaints. So another thing that's, Bill did some work on this year is every budget year for the last few years, we've been putting money into reserves for transformers. And we identify as well projects that people talk to us about. So Melanie's Ridge, you know, they're going to do phase 1 and 2, so Bill puts all the transformers in there. And typically what happens is Melanie's Ridge only does half of the first phase and not the 2 we budgeted. So I asked Bill, you know, could you look back right now in working with the Director of Finance, at the end of FY20, we'll have about $100,000 that we put away the last few years for transformers. So I said, Bill, how much are you spending on transformers and pad mount switches as an average over the last few years? So Bill went back, did the work, did the research, and you'll see down there the bottom line, the 4-year average that we've spent to accommodate all the development we've had, the projects people are saying. 4-year average for transformers is $40,000. Pad mount switches is $22,500. So it comes out to an average of about $62,000. So right now we have $100,000 budgeted in reserves, not budgeted, I apologize, in reserves, so that if we have a spike, we can deal with it. He's also in this budget identified certain transformers that are going to go. I believe the Wawa transformer is in here, so things like that. But hopefully this will help us better plan. We'll track that, and we won't need to have, you know, we think about $150,000 in reserves probably would take care of just about any year we could have. If something really economic development went kind of wild, we'd come back to City Council and say, you know, we need to accommodate this developer. We didn't realize it was going to happen. So that's something that's in this budget, and we're working to try to identify. So another thing I want to talk about is Council really is aware we finished the AMI project this year and the substation project with help from really all of staff, administrative staff, public works, and electric worked really hard to bring this project across the finish line. $7.3 million total bond that we did. After everything was said and done and all the bills are in, it looks like we're going to have quite a bit of money left over, okay? We have the ability through our bond to spend down the contingency funds over the next 2 years. A couple ways of doing it. So June and I have worked with DMEC, and this year what we put in this budget was $280,000 of revenue. And the way that's going to look when you look at the budget, it reduced that bond payment down this year, okay? So that bond payment for the next 2 years will be kind of artificially suppressed because this money is coming in, and we want to spend down all those contingency funds. And this is a way we can do this to close that bond out. So that's one of the reasons why you're seeing that electric transfer at $3.2 million from the 2.8, because this is an infusion of cash that the city has the right to use in this way to kind of lower the rate here. Any questions about that?
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Only thing I'll say is that this money will be gone after 2 years, so we got to keep our eye on that. We're doing it conservatively this year at 280. That's a little bit less than half. So as things finish up, we'll go ahead and get a report on what's remaining next year and go ahead and spend that out so that we don't leave any money on the table. Any questions before we leave the electric budget?
No, sir.
All right, Public Works, and our Director of Public Works, Burley Mears, is here. I guess some more good news. The Unified Sewer District that we've been working on for, Mayor likes to keep dates. Have we been working on that one for 3 years or 5 years?
Or 10 years.
10
I don't
years,
know.
okay.
It seems like forever, but yes, it's great to see the project continue to move on even during these times.
Yeah, so Mr. Mears has really been babysitting this project day to day with the engineering staff and the construction crews. And they are on schedule to receive flows down at the plant in October of this year, November at the latest. So Burley and his staff did some costing. Once they turn that switch on, so to speak, and that flow starts coming to us, we obviously are going to start billing the county for those services. So what that equates to, once all is said and done, and they've kind of crunched the numbers, this budget includes half, 6 months of operation, or $320,000 in anticipated revenue for this investment we've made or this endeavor we're in. So that's the good news. That's included. That's one of the reasons why we can do that additional transfer to general fund from the sewer operation. The sewer collector budget has a mainline sewer camera in it. This has been, Burley, we've been putting money away for 5 years. Is that about right? We had initially wanted to put money away for 3, and then as we put money away, the cost of the camera went up. So as all things go, this is the year that we will purchase that camera at $105,000. The majority of that money comes out of reserves. Yes, sir.
Before we move on, Councilman McCoy, if we could, a unified sewer district, the budget of 320 over a 6-month span. How is that number calculated, or where do we come up with that number from?
Okay, so, and Burley, would you like to come up and talk about the costing that you've done and how that kind of back-of-house calculation works?
Hey, Burley.
Hey, so basically how they pay through our agreement is a percentage of flow. So we're estimating that they're going to be 30% of our flow. So I just basically took our budget and what we spend on an annual basis, took 30% of it, looked at a few other things, and that's kind of what it comes out to.
Okay. So it's the overall percentage, not, in my mind, the way I'm thinking about it is if they have a population continues to grow in that area, we're going to see additional flow. Would the estimated revenue increase? But you're saying it's based upon a percentage, so it's probably going to remain around the same.
No, so if their population increases or their discharge to us increases, then their bill goes up.
Even if ours goes up as well?
No, it's proportionate. So if we have 1 million gallons and they give us 400,000 of it, and we do 600,000 of it, they pay 40%, we pay 60%.
10-4. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this project is, we haven't really talked a whole lot about it, but I think the impact on the city of Seaford is going to be huge. It's, the opportunity is just great, so thank you.
Thanks, Burley.
Yeah, this is a great investment, and the only kind of other comment I'll add, we're doing a very conservative budget this year for this revenue, and next year you'll see that number increase because we anticipate to have a full year of discharge through there. We talked about the sewer collector camera. The only other comment I'll make about this, we haven't had a sewer camera functioning, Burley, for
5 years.
Yeah. And that's really important for what we maintain. We really need to be able to do sewer inspections on a regular basis, so this will be a much-needed tool that we get. Some more good news we'd like to share included in this budget is the water tower lease for the Lowe's water tower. So that's the actual install that's out there now, a picture of it. And through Burley's work negotiating with Verizon, we do realize a profit to us of $25,800 annually for every year now going forward. So council will recall we repainted the water tower on Spruce Street, and that number is in this budget, that capital payment and interest. So this is right in this budget to offset that payment. So we're not putting this money into reserves. This goes into operations to pay that capital. So Burley, do you have any update on the Delaney negotiations? Are they going to move forward with that? Or?
It's kind of went dark. I haven't heard much from them here lately as far as the next one they want to do.
They won't return your call?
Bad service.
Any other questions on sewer collector before we move on to the wastewater treatment plant?
Yes, sir.
All right, so it's got some capital items, installing new blowers, and this is a 2-year project. That's to increase aeration in the plant, the oxic tanks, so we can increase treatment to respond to the additional flows. And if you really review this budget and you look at the value of the solar farm that we installed, it's really laid out in here very well. And yes, we're going to use a lot more electric for this, but because our solar farm that our electric department is maintaining and our wastewater staff is doing the work with, this is not going to cost us everything that it otherwise would. We're not buying all that electric off the grid. So not only is bringing that waste here and treating it a good idea, but our investment in the solar farm really is paying off on reduced treatment costs, and that's very well laid out in our budget. Again, more computers And then I would like Burley to talk about the next cost.
Okay, so there's a lot of information in these two slides, and I'll give you kind of a high level. The last plant expansion was done in 1998. Typical life of equipment in our industry is around 20 years. You know, so we're at year 22 right now. The staff down there does an excellent job of maintaining everything. We've been fortunate that mayor and council through the years have always gave us the money to do what we need and keep the plant up and running. So, you know, we're looking at, when it's time, we're looking at about the estimate we got a few years ago was about a $28 million project to redo the plant, upgrade it, expand it, you know, to be able to keep up with flow projections and also, you know, current NPDES permit limits. So what I've proposed here is that we kind of kick that can down the road, as Charles like to say. But with that, we need to do some important upgrades to parts of the plant that are old. You know, the headworks of that plant is from the 60s, actually. So we have some equipment that needs to be replaced. We have a grit channel down there that we've been babysitting for a few years. We've rebuilt it once, and we're probably going to have to rebuild it again here soon. So when we contracted with GMB to do a PER, preliminary engineering report, for the plant upgrade, they broke down every piece of treatment and every piece of the plant down into its own little upgrade, and then they costed that. So what I've proposed here is I picked out certain parts of the plant that I think that I know are current concerns with the staff down there, and pieces that are important to keep us going into the future. And it ends up being about $6 million or so that I would like to try to get done in the next I guess it's 4 years, 4 years or so. So that money would not be spent in vain per se, you know. So if we ever do go to do the big plant upgrade, all this upgrade would go towards that. So it's just pulling it right out of the preliminary engineering report that GMB has already given us. So what I'm proposing for this year is the actual design portion of it. So as you can see, there's $463,000 for the design. With the Unified Sewer District agreement, we go back to the 30% that they would be on the hook for. So they're around $139,000. So we would then have to pay the remainder. So I feel like that could really push the plant. We would have no real holdback on what we can do down there until we really had our usage bumped up. You know, so say we didn't have any particular user come in and give us a lot more flow, we could ride this thing out for as long as, you know, into this foreseeable future for quite a while. You know, now if our flows start going up and our limits get tighter, or you know, we have a great business come in that really has some load on our plant, then we would have to look at an actual plant expansion to treat the waste. So,
Okay. Yes, sir. Councilman Henderson.
Apologize for being late, but I was listening on the way in, but I may have missed the additional amount of flow that we estimate coming from Bridgeville Greenwood.
Yeah, that the numbers we've always heard is about 250,000 gallons. Now, I just got a call from the engineer today that they're looking at possibly giving us about another $150,000 from Blades area, which will be under the Unified District umbrella, so it won't be coming out of Bridgeville.
So with that additional 400,000 gallons, that gets us to where on our average daily flow?
About the 1.4.
Okay, so we're right at 1 million now.
Yeah, our flows have actually gone down, believe it or not. We're about 850 or so right now. I think we were thinking it's mainly when Allen's left.
The hatchery?
Yeah, when the hatchery left. That's what we're seeing.
Councilman McCoy?
Two questions. At the bottom there says the date of the 31st on 2024. That would be for the projected $6 million in advancements. Is that correct?
Yep, so what I laid out was that we would complete preliminary design by January 31st, 2022. Now, these are all just numbers, kind of,
Sure.
you know,
I got
throw
you.
against the wall here.
I
You know,
agree.
there's a lot of factors that go into this, but we'd complete the final design in July, so 6 months later, 2022. We'd start the process for project referendum or find alternatives for funding sometime in August of '22. Secure the project funding, and then also start construction around that January 31st of '24 number.
And I know you're dealing with a lot of variables, and you mentioned, you know, a big business coming in or things of that nature, draw additional flowage. But if you go and you proceed with this $6 million advancement, and you use the term kick the can down the road, ballpark, how many years is kicking the can down the road, making a $6 million advancement, till we have to look at the additional 22 and change?
Well, like I said, if there's nothing that comes in giving us any more flow, or you know, there's no additional nutrient load, or there's no more stringent NPDES permit limits, then, you know, we can ride this thing out. You know, the tankage is there, the equipment's there. You know, we might have to replace some valuable pieces of equipment, you know, in 5-10 years, you know, things like that. But yeah, it could really go down. Now, I'm not saying it could last 20, 30 years, but it can push us down there quite a bit.
Thanks, bro.
It's kind of a tough question to answer
I
because you
know,
just don't know what the economy's
Sure.
going to do, and building, you don't believe it. You know, but you did a good job. Councilman Mulvaney?
Really, where does the 100-year floodplain fall into this?
We have GMB has already done that for us. So this $6 million takes into consideration some of those things that we would have to do for that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The copper limits, did we get anything back when we dropped the copper? Or did we drop the copper with the lack of flow from the hatchery?
It has. Yeah, it has.
So do we get that back?
So
Or no?
we have the agreement with DENREC under Secretary's order. You know, so we have protection right now, and it gave us protection until they write us a new NPDES permit. So our NPDES permit runs out this year. We've already submitted the application to renew it. So we really don't know until they give us the new application, but there's a lot of groundwork and work that we've already done with the consultant and everything else that I think will be pretty favorable moving forward. But like you alluded to, with Allen's going away, it has gone way down.
So when they did they reduce our flow as a result of the limit?
Did who reduce it?
The DENREC? I mean,
No.
did they handicap the total flow because of the limit? Okay. So it didn't really have any effect on the capacity of the plant?
Now, if the concentrations were way up, then that ultimately affects how much flow you could take in.
Right.
Because, you know, but yeah.
Good. Any other questions? Thanks, brother. Good job.
Before the Director of Public Works goes away, just a couple more comments about this. This loan that's in here to do this headworks upgrade, that would be a planning advance from the SRF. So that's not money we have to come up with in our budget. If we apply for a planning advance from SRF and go through that process, then they would give us that money in anticipation of the $6 million loan, okay? So the risk there is if we decide not to take the SRF loan, we have to pay that money back. So council will have to make that decision. There'll be resolutions along the way, but you'll see that this budget year coming up, moving forward, where we'll do that. Council's used that loan program many times in the past, but that is how that is funded in this budget.
I believe how we talked about the substation for so many years, building up towards that, this is now going to take that place, and this is going to be our focus over the next several
Yeah,
years.
and when you, yes, sir, this is going to be a multi-year project, but we've got a great team in place to make this happen and bring this in. The other thing you'll see when you look at your budget specific to the compost budget, this is a transition year. This FY21, you'll see $130,000 worth of contractor fees in there, and that is a fee we're going to pay to Sussex County to take our sludge. So as I understand the biosolids side of the process, we're going to run it through our belt filter press, and then we're finished with it. We're going to turn it over to the county for completion of treatment. Did I state that pretty well? Okay. So a lot of the composting goes away. We won't have any more of that for sale. We won't have to have a person over there turning those piles, keeping all those records. That's basically a dedicated full-time person that kind of will go away. So you see, when you go through that budget this year and compare it to last year, you see no manpower cost. We've absorbed that into the wastewater budget itself. Next year, basically compost budget will kind of go away. It will be no longer. It'll all be part of the plan. So we'll bring the liquids and the solid side together under one budget. Just a little different, so you'll see that in the budget when you do your detailed review. Any other questions before we move on to the next? Yes, sir.
Dan Henderson. So composting is going away. It did receive some income, but it wasn't.
I mean, income, yeah, income
How
was
much?
very.
$6 grand a year.
Was that all?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's something, but.
Well, we got rid of it, that's the main thing.
Yeah,
was getting rid of
okay.
disposing of the product.
So how much is it going to cost us to, what's the county rate, what do they want?
About 130,000 is what the costing they've done. Now, what you got to compare that against is
But
that
the workers
personnel.
will fold back into the plant.
Yep, that personnel, that burden, that overhead, the OECs there.
There's electrical costs from blowers,
Mhm.
bulking material, wood chips, polymers, and different things that will all go with.
Right.
One of the big things too, while we're talking about that, is this piece of equipment here, our front end loader, very, very large purchase. Okay, we were getting close to replacement on that. We're working towards replacement on that. I'm not sure what your schedule is on that. What are you?
So it's 22?
But we're not going to use that piece of equipment every day once compost goes away. So the next one we purchase, in talking with Burley, he'd like to keep this equipment's capabilities in our fleet because we can use it for a lot of other things, leaf and limb disposal area. When we really get a lot of snow, those are the kinds of pieces of equipment that you want. So the replacement cycle will get a little longer because it won't be used as much. But that's still in the budget. We're still putting that money away. But compost will look different, the whole operation as well as its budget. And any other questions for Burley on compost or wastewater treatment plant?
Any questions? I think we're good, Charles.
All right, the golf and pool operations, thank you very much, Burley.
Thanks, Brian.
Just an update as of today, we traded some emails with the Seaford Community Swim Center president. That board did make the decision today to not open the pool this year, okay? So they couldn't staff it, and that's not good news for the community. It's kind of sad, but they are operating out of an abundance of caution, and they're really facing what's in front of them. So when we go back, we did not have enough time today to go through and revise that budget. We did ask our superintendent of Parks and Recreation to reach out to our contractor, and he's telling us that what we should do for maintenance purposes is operate the pumps twice a week for a couple hours. So we're going to put together a maintenance schedule where someone goes in there, turns those on a few times for the maintenance purposes, walks through the building, make sure there's no vandalism, nothing happening. We're going to try to work with the Seaford Community Swim Center to do that. But we, in our budget revision before we present it to council again, we will reduce those numbers down to a bare minimum. So that number will change. Right now, what's in the budget is about $50,000 for the pool. It does include new pumps, which will have to be done. So one of the things we talked with the president about was, we'll leave the $16,000 pump but we'll purchase it next year. We don't want to purchase the pumps and have the warranty run sitting on a shelf. So we'll just postpone that purchase until basically this time next year, but we'll have it in the budget so we can start the pool up, purchase the pumps, and hopefully just start again next year with opening the pool. Any questions on the pool before I move on to the golf course?
Good.
All right, so the golf course, let me just add one thing. Council will recall we are in year 1 of 3 with a revenue sharing agreement with the pool. And we did put in $5,000 in this year. We obviously will take that out. But that agreement runs very similar to the golf operation. So we are in the 3rd year of our agreement with Atkins Management for management of the golf course. And we will certainly open up negotiations with them and bring that revised agreement back with council should council decide to continue with that organization. I will just state they have done a great job out there, are doing a great job. In this budget, you will see battery replacement. So we bought carts, and there are some notes in the budget when you look at that, but they're about halfway through their life cycle. The understanding that we have is you buy a cart, 4 years later you replace all the batteries, and then 4 years after that, the carts are in essence, they got to get replaced. They've reached their end of life. So we are at halfway for that. Additionally, we've gotten the golf course folks, the Golf Pro, to give us a price for what golf cart replacement would look like, and we've been setting aside money in reserves. So you'll see us hone in on that number over the next 3 to 4 years, because I believe the date we're going to do the purchasing is FY24 of the new fleet. There's a note in the budget there. And in addition to purchasing new carts, they are requesting that we go from 36 to 40. So the play is increasing, our revenues returned to us are increasing from that arrangement, and they are telegraphing to us they would like to increase the number of carts. So we're preparing to do that. And any questions on golf or pool? Yes, sir.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
I'll stick with the carts to begin with. Obviously, being service to the public, and I'm out there quite frequently, some of those carts are really getting beat up already.
They are.
It's just the abuse that the golfers use. But they have done a great job smoothing out some of the cart paths that were really hazardous. I was with a gentleman the other day out there that plays Rookery North, which is another course that Atkins runs. They went to all gas. They don't have any electric carts anymore. And it was because of the frequency of play. They get 3 rounds a day out of the gas and 2 rounds out of the battery.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and the cost is very similar. I would suggest, since I won't be on council, the next time you're buying them, to think really hard about staying with the gasoline ones.
Okay.
Because of the round of play. My next question was on the buildings and grounds maintenance item. Part of that spike, I'm sure, was the lounge expansion. Was the rest of it had anything to do with all the trees that have been removed?
Let me look at what you're looking at.
Item 433. It's the last 3 numbers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Buildings, when you're seeing the spike there, you're talking about in the FY20 actual number, that $11,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to look back at that. Did we replace an HVAC unit out there, Gene?
We did that, and then we also, and it was the expansion.
Was the expansion of the lounge.
Yeah, so that, you were correct, sir.
I was just, where does the cost of the tree removal come in? Because there's been extensive improvements done to the course.
There has been. Yeah, so what happens, the superintendent out there, Mike Pine.
Yeah, Mike.
Whatever he and his staff can do, they do at our maintenance fee. All right, when it gets beyond him, he will call our Director of Public Works, our Superintendent, our Director of Electric for assistance. As an example, Burley hauls materials for him, crusher runs, sand, things like that. So we partner. We do very little work to assist them, but if it is beyond their capabilities, they do call us. But pretty much for our maintenance fee, they do all of that tree work, and any incidental maintenance they do.
trees that just recently went down on the driving range, did we take care of that, or did they?
They did.
They did that,
I
okay.
believe they even
The
replaced the
electric
fence.
department was there the other day taking down the tops of the trees.
Yeah, see, that's where we go in and we help them beyond, what's
Yeah.
beyond their control.
Right.
And then they do the rest of it. They
The
actually
chipper
have,
would have been great that day.
it would have been. They actually have an area in the back of the golf course, right off of hole number 12, where they actually
Right,
put the
back to
debris.
12.
Yeah, in a composting situation.
Well, there is one that went down on the T of 14 now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
right there on Locust Street.
Unfortunately, I have not been able to
Yeah.
survey the course lately.
No, I don't know when your next meeting is with the Atkins guys, but I have noticed the expertise they did in taking down the trees they took down has greatly increased the speed of play. Greatly increased it.
You don't have to go into the woods. You can really get around there, can't you?
You really wouldn't know
Well,
that,
this
would
is
you?
mostly on the old course, though.
Okay.
It's on the old number 7 and 8, and number 2 and 4.
I will certainly pass that along. I mean, in the time that they've been maintaining the course from us from when we bought it in 2010,
Yeah. Oh, it's light years.
it does not look like the same course.
Looks great.
They are a very good contractor for
I
us.
think that was all I had. Then I had notes on that
Any other
one.
questions on the golf course?
I did, but
Okay, you got it.
Councilman Mulvaney answered.
All right, so the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department budget, very similar to the recent years that we've done. Lost control of my. And one of the projects that has come up is the fire department proper, the old building, I'll call it, 2-story building where the banquet hall is. We did some smoke testing last year, and we determined that those roof drains that are on the King Street side of the building are tied to the sewer. So we need to get that out of there. We talked about our flows. We really need to get stormwater out of the sewer system. So Burley's done some work on that, and the estimate he has to redo that, put rain leaders down the front of the building, is $49,500. That is included in this budget, and should council adopt this budget and decide to move forward with that expenditure, we will pursue that this next budget year and eliminate that from the sewer system, and that'll be helpful for us. So that's a project that's in there. You've seen this project probably for the last 4 years, but that emergency generator needs to be replaced. We are in, I believe it's year 3 or 4, I'm sorry, of putting $50,000 a year away. So next year, FY22, you'll see us replace that emergency generator if all goes well and stays static. Basically, nothing else in that budget has changed. So that's the fire budget. Any other questions about the fire budget?
Any questions?
We still are putting away the reserve account for heavy rescue equipment. Yes, sir.
That was my question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, $50,000 a year.
Is that just for the rescue, or is that for the aerial also?
It's for 2 pieces. It is for heavy rescue in the aerial, yes, sir. The ladder truck.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions on?
No, sir.
All right, so just some things we track in the budget. Total capital request, you can see there over the last few years, 2017 through 2021. So what's capital proposed in this budget is the highest it's been since 2017. So we're at $2.77 million. Now, a lot of that, there's some bigger projects in here, you know, the expansion of the utility building, so on and so forth, and how it compares to the last few budget years. But obviously, those are our estimates that we've done, and those numbers may change as we go through this process. Just a couple things. We talked a little bit about our general fund reserves. So these are the ones we track for budget. This is predominantly where we pull our money out of as far as balancing the budget. So you can see that number has gone up quite a bit. General fund reserve balance is now over $2 million. So those numbers are good. Bolstered by what we talked about earlier was that large amount of realty transfer tax in FY20. So good revenues coming forward to us, and we are putting them in reserves. This is our reserve transfer history. So the gold line, the tall bar each year, is what we propose in the budget and council approves as a projected transfer to balance the budget. That's been in the $700,000, $800,000 range for the last 3 budget years. And this year we're proposing roughly half, okay, because of the additional revenues that have come in. The blue bar that you see to the extreme left, that's what we actually wound up using of that. So for the last 3 years, we've not transferred any money. That's due in large part to our staff that really works hard to get the best price for things, do things where they can do it. And then unfortunately, it's staff at every level because a lot of this is unfilled positions and things projects cannot get done. So they carry the burden of that load. But that number is going in the right direction. And before I leave that, any questions on reserve status or what's included in the budget?
Sure.
All right. So about our debt service. So we've talked a lot about debt. We have a project going at police department for an expansion. We have we roll into the utility building expansion. We painted a water tower. We've bought some additional equipment. So you see there where our debt service is climbing. It's projected to be up above $790,000 next year. And then if we don't add any projects, it'll start to ease off over the next few years. This is a slide we like to show, we like to track. We obviously don't want to get our debt service up that we can't get over it or include it in future budgets. So next couple of years, we'll have a lot of debt service. Charges, there were no rate increases proposed. We revised this slide a little bit. FY21 tax rate is 34 cents per hundred. Last time we raised taxes, council will recall, was in FY14. Water stays the same. Last time we did a rate increase there was 2018 for water and sewer respectively. So those rates stay the same. There's no budget increase. Just some facts about our sewer budget, how much revenues, $2.1 million in revenue. We bill 47,000 EDUs per year. EDU is an equivalent dwelling unit. And then there's no rate increase. We track this number, a 1% rate increase yields $21,000. So just for informational purposes. And then the water budget's smaller, about half, $1 million. And then we sell about $44,000 worth of EDUs every year. And then no rate increase is proposed there, but a 1% rate increase there only yields about $10,000. So small return, small budget, okay? We always, every year, look at the median household income and what our water user sewer rates are in their combined total and a combined percentage of median household income. So 1.81%, that's exact same as it was last year because our rates haven't changed, nor has the median household income. So that's a very low, very affordable user and sewer, water user and sewer rate. So that's just a number we track. And then staffing considerations, total payroll,
Okay.
you can see there where we've tracked it. FY 2019, 5.1 million, then it went up to 5.3 in FY 20. This year, that total payroll is down to 4.6 million, or a 15% decrease. Yes, sir.
Dan Henderson. Can you go back to the water and sewer rate?
Yes.
The mean, is it mean or median? Median household
Yes, sir.
income. Are we at risk of losing funding because we're so low?
Well, I'll say a couple things about that. My quick answer is yes. We likely will not. The current SRF proposal is that if your combined water sewer rates are below 2%, they are affordable. So you don't stand to get any principal forgiveness. That's the current way they do it. We currently have one. Burley's been pursuing the Route 13 sewer project, and we are within, we would already have it had we not had these problems. We'll have an offer from them for financing. Now, their finance rate is they've drawn a floor of 2% for a 20-year loan. So, yeah, typically what we've seen in the past is that they do not give principal forgiveness unless there's another factor if you're below 2%. That's the reason why we track it. There is a move afoot to look at those things kind of differently because as everyone probably knows, these numbers, where I pulled this from was American Fact Finder, that's what they use, and it looks at census tracts. So some of the census tracts that cover Arch Street, Pine Street, kind of center city, downtown, also include West Seaford. So I think what you'll find if you did a door-to-door survey in center city Seaford, you'd find an income disparity between people that might live in West Seaford versus center city. So they are looking at the construct of how they do that, and they may change that. But yes, currently under the circumstances, based on their rules, we would not comply
We
with.
wouldn't get any principal forgiveness.
That's the way they've administered the program before. So we would highly recommend that we look at those rates, especially before we move in and we start asking for $6 million financing,
Yes.
because that makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
that can make or break a project like that, you know.
But when
'cause-
you're talking about 0.19%, you're looking at $6,000 of total income,
Well, we did
something
it.
like that.
Yeah, I think I know where your
So if
brain's going.
that's spread out across the city, that would be an affordable increase to get a principal forgiveness on a huge loan.
Right.
So I would encourage you to look at that. I'm not saying that we go right out and raise rates, but we need to really, really, really track that. If it doesn't go through, that they're going to recalculate the way they figure this out.
Yeah, and we'll have a great indicator over the summer, because this project that Burley is pursuing and his staff is pursuing with the engineers will really be an indicator of this. So, and what I would recommend that we do, Mr. Mears has laid out for the council a very solid plan of $6 million expansion. So we have some time to look at our rates. And if you, I believe June ran the number for us, yeah. And do you recall what the number was, June?
Yes, in order to get to 2% of median household income, the monthly rate had to be about $75 a month between the two, water and sewer. And that came up to almost, what was it, 11, almost 12% increase in rates.
Now remember when they do that calculation, and it's an interesting calculation, okay? So what they'll do is they'll take the debt service of your loan, a $6 million loan debt service, and they'll tack it on to this. So that project by itself could very likely put us over 2%, all right?
Well, as long as that's part of the calculation,
It is.
I think we're okay then.
They run two. Now, the only other thing I'll say to you is, because they see 2% as affordable, they're going to say, okay, you know, what you're short of 2%, that's a gimme. So you're not going to get that piece of it. So it might be something when we look at it and start to run our financial scenarios, we start to look at over a couple-year period, getting that number up to at least 2%, so the debt service that's tacked on, we will get principal forgiveness for all of that we can get. I know that I kind of talked around a lot, but we could put together a plan based on Burley's timing where, because what we don't want to do to our residents, obviously, we don't want any rate shock. We don't want to have to go up 3, 5, 7% in a very short period of time. If we could do 0.5% a year over a 2 or 3 year period to get us where we need to get, you know, I think that's the way to do it. Another thing to do too, we could think about, there is a program there, and I don't want to go too sideways, we don't have a lot of time, but there are some programs for lower income folks to where they will give us some money to help them offset their water and sewer bills if we take these loan programs. So if we have the capacity to do that, even though our rates go up a little bit, we might be able to offer some assistance to some of our more less fortunate ratepayers to help them with that. So, but Councilman, you are right on. We need to really keep an eye on that.
If I heard you right, it was $75 combined? So that's $7.40 a month increase to get to the 2%?
That would be, it depends on how you spread it over
That's
water and sewer, but that
Right.
could be a large increase.
I mean, that's a total.
Percentage-wise.
Right.
Yeah.
And I understand the percentages, but when you talk about dollars,
That's annually.
it helps a customer understand whether you pay that money or you pay even more because you didn't get your principal back.
Right. Yeah, financing charges start to really go high.
Because then you got to raise rates to pay for that.
Yes, sir.
So it's a tight balance.
And we'll certainly, as we move forward with this project over the next few years, we'll bring more information back about that and formulate a plan so we don't shock our customers with our rates. Just some staffing considerations. We are nearing the end. There's our total payroll, FY19 through FY21, 15% decrease, as we talked about. There is baked into this budget that's been presented an increase of $43,862 for general employees in wage increases, okay? So council will recall on 4/1, we did a 2% plan adjustment for everyone based on the compensation study consultant's recommendations. So this is the merit increase piece. So, and we'll talk more about that in a future slide, but that is the number for, and I have some numbers here. I believe it's 56 employees or general employees, 27 are in the sworn officer union, so that's just some numbers for you. FOP performance increase is $27,000. That's an interesting thing too, because we're at the end of a contract. They won't get their plan adjustment. Thank you, June. They won't get their plan adjustment until negotiations. So there is an increase that we have to do during this period, even when we don't have a contract, and that is that amount for 27 officers. So we don't know those dollars. I will share with you that we have looked at that, and there is some money that we've baked in there, obviously, to address that. We have to negotiate, but that is part of the reality of this budget. Yes, sir.
Pardon me.
Yes, sir.
Dan Henderson again. So is that plan adjustment backloaded under the FOP contract, or is it going to be with the new representation?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question correctly, but we would have to agree to back pay as part of our negotiation status. And in prior contracts with the FOP, we have done that. That's all up to negotiations for this contract.
But you have a different negotiator.
We do. If you don't mind, I'd like to discuss that in executive session if we could.
All right.
All right, so some other numbers we track. This is our compensation plan adjustments over the last few years. Traditionally, we've done a 1% plan adjustment, and then as stated in April of this year, council was fortunate enough to provide the employees were fortunate enough that council provided the employees with a 2% plan adjustment, which we very much appreciate. Social Security CIP increase for 2019 was 2.8. I looked this number up, again, Google researched here, so take it for what it's worth. The CIP for FY 2020 was 1.6%. That was obviously before the current events occurred, so, that's just a number that we use as a metric. This is a slide from the salary compensation study, and it's small, and I apologize, but what this shows, and this is for illustrative purposes only, so I remind all of the staff, don't get hung up on these numbers, get hung up on what's going on here. So we did a plan adjustment of 2%. This is the performance adjustment. So based on your ranking, needs improvement, meets expectations, exceeds, or outstanding, you would then get the other, because your raise is a two-part raise, okay? You would get the other piece. But what this shows, the consultant identified in our pay plan, the longer you've been here, the less of a raise that you got, because we took away the steps 6 years ago. So they're saying, look, to correct this salary compression that the kind of employees with more longevity are experiencing, you should implement this for this type of matrix for a few years. So, less than 5 years, you get a very small increase, and then it goes across as your performance is better. As you have more longevity in your job function, that number goes up. So people who have 15 years or more and are outstanding are at the higher end of that, okay? So again, we're not recommending 4.25 on top of the 2% that employees got. We looked at it, and because we took into account, we would have done this together had it been coupled, but we decoupled it. And so this is what we came up with. So a person who has been with us less than 5 years and meets expectation, what we've put into the budget is 0.5%. Now remember, they also got 2% on 4/1. So when you look at this period of time, they got a 2.5% pay increase. But if you're talking about someone who's been here 15 years, they would get a little more. And so the consultant said if you do some things like this for a few budget years, you'll fix that problem that we're seeing in the analysis that we've done. June, did I state that eloquently?
Kind of.
There's a lot going on there, but those are the numbers we baked in. So that $45,000 that you see, that's this component based on their performance for the general employees, which includes deputy chief, all the non-sworn people. All right, police department, there's a lot going on here, and certainly the chief is here. The city of Seaford Council was gracious enough to authorize the troop strength to go up to 29 sworn officers as a stopgap measure for the chief to deal with attrition, which we've had some of, obviously. So we're trying to deal with that, trying to get people through this process, but that is in this budget, so 29 is still there. We as a council, you as a council, we as a staff will have to work with you on when we'll go to 28, because that was the idea. But really our attrition has to level off. So full year this year, 29 officers, which means we will hire to replace the person that recently resigned. When you read through all that on how long it takes to get through and the reasons why we're having what we're having, the other issue that has been put into this budget at the recommendation of your chief of police is reinstating a second lieutenant this budget year. So that doesn't mean a new person. That means there'll be testing and there'll be a promotion that will occur hopefully from within the ranks, and they'll be elevated. So we'll have 2 lieutenants to be able to assist with some of the duties. Goes on to talk about next year's. He's telegraphing to you, as the chief always does. He's thinking a step ahead. So he's talking about next budget year to present increasing the sergeants so we can go away from the platoon system, but that is not in this budget this year. Did I miss anything on that, chief? So any questions on those staffing considerations for the police department? We've talked about that plan for several years now. The chief and the deputy chief are really moving that forward. Economic development, this was in the budget last year, and it got cut due to the hiring freeze that we did. So it's a part-time employee, 29 hours a week, pay grade 3 or $14.65 per hour to assist with public information marketing. If we've learned anything through the latest weeks and months and years, we really need to be putting our message out there. We need to be, putting out electric bill reading videos, hydrant flushing, pandemic things. So that department really needs some assistance with that, and we're going to try to wade into it with a part-time person if we can find it. The finance department, again, this position was cut last year due to it was stopped due to the hiring freeze. It's in this year, and it is a person to assist with accounting. It's budgeted for only 6 months, and it is pay grade 6, and that is also baked in. Any questions on what's included as far as staffing in the budget?
Sir.
All right, so that concludes. Yes, sir.
Which 6 months?
The last 6 months of the budget year.
January through July, or to June?
Yeah, I don't want to include it right to start and then have to tell them goodbye.
So it's just for your budget process and...
Well, and in reality, too, we're going to need to get an application, or an ad out. We're going to need to receive applications. There's going to be a long process. And realistically, with getting through the budget, rolling everything over for all that June and her people have to do, she's likely not going to be able to focus on this for a couple months anyway, so.
So it's not necessarily a seasonal thing. It would be the
You are
full
correct.
year the next year,
You are
not just 6 months a year.
Yes, sir. It's just 6 months in this coming budget. Any other questions?
No, sir.
All right, I want to thank everyone for I know we took a little longer than I had hoped, but thank you very much.
Okay, we are going to need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second Councilman McCoy.
Councilman McCoy seconds. Erica, can we do a roll call vote?
Yes. Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Mulvaney?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous, and it's 7:49. We'll go into executive session. Thank you.